My story begins, like many do, with my parents. This is David and Maureen. They each grew up outside of Boston. My dad in Needham and my mom in Somerville. Aren't they handsome? Isn't it curious that when we look at old photographs, people look so well dressed in a time when fast fashion isn't an option? So, in preparing for this talk, I came to understand my particular interest in fashion. On one hand, I like really practical clothing. I appreciate uniforms, clothing that is designed to help you do a job. But on the other hand, I love beautiful things. Things that aren't practical, like dresses that take up an entire couch, for instance. So my dad was an engineer, practical guy, patriotic. He always drove an American car, and he was always upset with me that I didn't, which I find funny now because I spend so much time trying to buy locally. This doesn't sound very practical, but he built a 50-foot schooner in my yard, in our yard, when I was growing up. So I have a lot of memories of helping him, you know, sanding and painting, and we even built a fiberglass tank together. So I remember going to school with like paint in my hair and just having a sense of pride about that. He taught me about the value of hard work and what it means to build something. My mom was a stay-at-home mom with 8 kids. Let's just say she felt things deeply. She's someone that loved beautiful things that she really couldn't afford, but she'd rather go without than have a knockoff. So I have this memory of my mother. I wanted to go swimming in the pond in town with the neighborhood kids, and we lived in a 3-story house, and I just ran through the house looking for her so that I could get permission, and I found her kneeling in front of the television set folding clothing, and she immediately silenced me. So I paused. She was watching an old romantic movie with Cary Grant, An Affair to Remember. It's that scene where Cary Grant is just about to learn something crucial about the woman that he loves. So I paused, and I looked at my mom's face, and I looked at the TV screen, and I looked at my mom's face again, and I could just see that she was open to being moved by this art. So this isn't something that she didn't sit me down and teach me this skill, but I picked it up. I'm really moved by beautiful things. Art and sculpture can take my breath away. And if you know me, you know this is true. When I hear a really good idea, the hair on my arms stands up. My mom taught me something else. This is my parents on their wedding day in 1957. She bought that dress at Filene's Basement in Boston. Filene's Basement was a bargain basement for designer clothing. She found this dress, and the bottom was filthy from being dragged on the basement floor. But she got it anyway, and she brought it home, and she hung it on the chandelier above the family dining room table, and she and her mom gently cleaned the lace with toothbrushes and soapy water. So this is a story I grew up with, a story about caring for something beautiful, about restoration. So I want you to fast forward in your minds from when my parents are married to when I'm a young teen in the early 80s. my mom came into a little bit of money, and she was someone who lived for today. So she gave each of the kids $100 to spend in any way we wanted. And she brought a few of us to Boston, and wouldn't you know it, we ended up at Filene's basement. Now, I wasn't a kid that was interested in fashion at this time. I was that kid that played outside all day, and I really wouldn't come in until my parents yelled me in for supper. But I knew better than to nag my mom and say, "Are we going yet?" I knew that this was a mom with 8 kids. I knew this was a special time for her. So I just circled the store, entertaining myself, and that's when I got to see beautifully made clothing. I saw the insides, I saw the construction, I saw beautiful finishing. And soon I found myself in the footwear section. And I vividly remember seeing a pair of Charles Jourdan shoes, like the ones that you see here. These are part of the permanent collection at the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston. So I hope that you can see what I saw that day, which is beautiful craftsmanship and design, thoughtful design. Thank you. So time goes on. I go to college. I'm in my 20s, and I find it pretty easy to live with the values that my parents raised me with. I bought secondhand clothes. I bought vintage clothes. I bought new things too, but I was pretty picky. This is me in my Madonna phase. I wore a lot of vintage men's suit coats and bustiers. During the day, I like to think that I looked kind of like a photographer on assignment. I wore Doc Martens and black leggings and oversized army jackets with like a bike messenger bag. But time goes on. I get married. I have a couple of kids, 2 boys, and that's when I'm faced with a challenge. How do I dress my boys in quality clothing when fast fashion is the overwhelming option? It just didn't feel right. I mean, think of what I talked about when I was in Filene's basement. When I'd walk into these stores, the fabric didn't feel good, the construction was poor, and life is short. So that questioning was my first step in how I built community around sustainable style, accidentally at first, and then on purpose. So let me pause for a minute and say what I mean about sustainable style. It doesn't mean that you can't buy anything new. It just means that you buy things of quality that will last. And it means being mindful of the choices that you make. How does it affect people locally and globally? How does it affect the environment locally and globally? So this was a period of time that I was questioning and I was struggling, but I was also lucky because it was the same time that there was this mommy blogger phenomenon taking off. So I found a community of people online who were willing to share inspiration for how to live more sustainably. And soon enough, I joined in with my own blog called Recover Girl. So this blog name causes a lot of confusion. People think that I'm recovering from something, but I'm not. It's, as far as I know. So it's really a play on the brand name CoverGirl with RE added to the front to hopefully bring to mind reduce, reuse, and recycle. Now, this is definitely the accidental phase of my journey to build community. I really was just blogging for myself. I was reading and sharing, learning by doing. But I've come to think of blogging as a much more courageous act. I unwittingly announced to my community that I was someone who knew something about sustainable style, and after years of reading and writing about it, I do. So here is an example of an early blog post. This is my son Douglas. He's almost 18 now, and he heads to college next year to study engineering. So he was interested in engineering early on, and instead of going to a store and buying a plastic toy science kit, I went to the dump and I got a old phone. I gave him a screwdriver, and he entertained himself. And he put the parts into like piles, and we still have those pieces in a Tupperware bin in the house, and he knows to go there if he needs a part. This is my son Alex. He hopes to be a photographer someday. This was a post. He was invited to a birthday party on a beach, and I sewed the towel cape as a gift to his friend. But time goes on, and my boys become less and less interested with me writing and photographing them. So I had to narrow my focus, and I chose to focus in on style, sometimes decorating, but mostly fashion. So this is an example of a style post that I wrote. This is Aurora James. She is the designer behind Brother Velle's shoes. She was a finalist in the CFDA Vogue Fashion Fund competition a few years back. So I really appreciate her style. To me, it looks like this mix of global and 70s and vintage. And so I recreated an outfit that I felt captured her style, and all of these pieces are available or were available secondhand. And it was my way of promoting this concept of secondhand first. So I shared like bloggers do, I shared my posts on all my social media channels, and I shared a style post, and it got the attention of the editor of the local weekly arts and culture paper, The Sound. They invited me to contribute a monthly column on style. And I have to say here that if you are at all like me, I was really insecure with my ability to write or photograph or interview people, but I just trusted that I had something to say. So every time, this is an example of one of the stories that I did of this lovely gentleman, James Mooney. Every time I would submit a story, I was plagued with fear. But over and over again, people would stop me and say, literally stop me on the street. And they would say, I really appreciate the stories that you're sharing. So that gave me the boost to keep moving. So I'm a middle-aged mom, but I'm lucky I have friends that are in their 20s. And my friend who was in her 20s was on the UNH campus, and she saw this story posted to a dorm room door. And that, to me, was just the ultimate compliment. So this style that I was narrowing in on was resonating with 70-year-old gentlemen, middle-aged moms, and 20-something millennials. So the positive response we got to the monthly column allowed us to turn it into a standalone glossy magazine. our mission was to celebrate local, unique, body positive, and sustainable style. And this is when this journey of building community is definitely moving from accidental to on purpose. Now it's me and the editors at the center, and we're inviting contributors, writers and photographers to join us. And then we're asking them to go out into the community and find people who are practicing this sustainable style and report on them. And then when it's all done and published, we sent it out into the community to plant seeds. And this is when this community is really forming. So far, I've been talking about contributing online and in print, but it's important to bring people together. So that was happening as well. I am an employee of the Portsmouth Public Library, and years ago, I was on the programming committee, and I suggested that we start a clothing swap. So as you can see from the poster, what you do is you bring a bag of clothing from your own wardrobe that you don't want anymore, and you bring it to the swap, and then a band of volunteers immediately sort it onto tables by color, and then you refill your bag with new-to-you items. You can't tell because I'm nervous, but this is a really fun event. It's so people really look forward to it, and friends are bumping into friends, neighbors are bumping into neighbors, kids are dancing around. And this last year was the 9th annual, next year is the 10th annual. And we had to move to a larger venue. Over 300 women attended, men and women actually. We have a men's table. 300 women attended, men and women, and we raised over 2,000 pounds of donations for goodwill, right? And, and arguably that could have been diverted from a landfill. So I'd just like to add this little story about the swap. I can't tell you how many times I have seen two women, not at the swap, later in time, two women talking to each other, and one woman realizes that the other woman is wearing something from her wardrobe. So talk about building community, right? That's really tightening the community. Oh, heavy. So I've been talking about what is sustainable style, but we need to talk about the why. So what you're seeing here is the Savar building collapse from 2013. It was a garment factory that collapsed in Bangladesh, and over 1,000 people died, and thousands more were injured. I find it really hard to talk about this, obviously, not just because it's such a horrific thing, but I don't want to misrepresent anyone or anything. So I just want to say, well, two things. The factory had clients, businesses that were in North America, and just that this is a tragedy that could have been avoided. I was just talking about the human toll of fast fashion, and now I just want to talk a little bit about the environmental toll. Now, I feel like we are bombarded with images in our social media feed of pollution, so this might not feel tragic, but I just want to narrow in on this one piece. So there's a new documentary coming out called River Blue, and it's about how fashion, dyes used in fashion are polluting our waterways. This is a screenshot from their trailer. I think you can see that dye is entering the river. And this is another image of dye entering the river. So what I want you to do is just think about how important the Piscataqua River is to our community, and what we would feel like if it looked like this. And why are we okay with someone else's river looking like this? So this is probably not the worst sin of fast fashion, but this is the one that really gets under my skin. It's the amount of waste it creates. I'm someone, if I make dinner for my boys and they don't eat it and I scrape it into the trash, I get really annoyed. So now think of it on this giant scale. Americans throw away 14 million tons of clothing each year. 14 million tons, and that's what we're buying and throwing away. There's an additional problem that's happening where clothes that are not being sold are being destroyed. So this headline, H&M, a fashion giant, has a problem, 4.3 billion in unsold clothes. And this one is from last month. Burberry burned millions of dollars worth of unsold stock. There just has to be a better way. So I don't want to be a Debbie Downer about fashion because I hope from the beginning that you understand how much I appreciate beautiful things, and I all want us to, celebrate our own personal style. But fast fashion, it's not that beautiful. It doesn't really feel good. It's not constructed well, and soon it will end up in our landfills. So we're often told if we want to make positive change, we need to start with ourselves. So that's what I did. Me and my friend Kirsten, she's the 20-something that I told you about, we decided that we were going to devote a day to sewing. So we rented Bowie Gallery in Kittery, and we challenged ourselves to sew from 7 o'clock in the morning to 7 o'clock at night, like Project Runway. It was a blast. What am I forgetting? Hold on. So the day that was available to rent was Black Friday, the day after Patrick. You're throwing me.
Tried to sneak in, I'm sorry.
Okay, where was I? Project Black Friday. So the day that was available was Black Friday, which felt fortuitous, right? Because that has become a day that's associated with shopping, and we felt like we could turn it on its head and make it a day about making. So the first year, it was just the two of us, and then the next year, there were 5. And the local paper covered it, and it just created a lot of buzz. Each of us was sharing our progress on social media, so we were just sensing that something really good is happening here. People felt good and interested, and it was starting a conversation. It felt like it could turn into something bigger and better, and that bigger and better thing was Project Upcycle. So Project Upcycle is a sustainable fashion competition and live runway event that happened earlier this year at 3S Art Space. So together, 3S, Goodwill, and myself made it our mission to bring together designers from around New England and introduce them to a larger audience. So that was bigger and better than I ever thought it would be. There were so many connections, heartwarming connections and stories that came out of that. Buy me a drink sometime and I will tell you all about it. But there's one particular story that I want to talk about because I didn't know it happened until after the fact. So this is Nate Higgins. He was the MC for our event as his drag persona, Bunny Wonderland, and he crushed it. I can never thank him enough for what he did. It was a real love fest. So I need to explain, the gallery space at 3S, we invited the designers to bring something that they had designed in the past. So Nate, at some point, went through the gallery and he saw this jacket that was designed by one of the designers, Jared DeSimio. So this jacket is entirely upcycled from 2 other jackets. All the pocket, everything is new again. And I'm told that there's an interesting weave on the back. So later that year, Nate went on a trip to the UK and he shared this on Instagram. So let's see what he says. I'm in love with my anorak made by Jared DeSimio. This magical little jacket kept me warm and dry while traveling the UK. I can't say enough about this fantastic designer and his sustainable fashion practices. Dear God, give him all your business. I saw this on Instagram like everyone else, and I didn't know this was happening, and it just felt lovely to see how these connections continued to spread. So now I want to review the stages I took, the steps that I took to accidentally and then on purpose build a community around sustainable style. So first, identify your nagging question. What is that thing that causes you to say, there's gotta be a better way? Find your community. It sounds silly and simple, but I think just looking online for people who are sharing stories about what you care about can be another step. Bring people together. It's not rocket science. Good stuff happens when you bring people together around a common cause, and don't worry if it's just 2 of you to start. Contribute to your community. Give back, even if you're afraid. I'm petrified most of the time. Look for opportunities to grow. Listen to your community. What feedback are you getting? Are you getting that positive feedback? Are you hearing some buzz? Is the hair on your arm standing up? And this is the last step. Nurture the connections. I've worked so hard to bring all these people together. Now I need to stay in touch with them and try to keep them in touch with each other. And if I'm lucky, this will always be on my to-do list. Thank you.